Hello, and welcome to Coding with Kriller. Today we will be learning about functions, the basic way you can organize your code in the C++ language. Before I begin, let me just quickly say that I'm sorry I'm uploading this video almost a week late. Some personal stuff came up, and I wasn't able to get it done as fast as I would have liked. I can't promise that it won't happen again, but going forward into the future, I will do my best to upload on time every time, and will develop contingency plans to make sure that happens. That said, let's get on with the video. To show you how powerful functions can be in organizing code, I will be starting this video with unorganized code. In this example, the LED blinks slowly 5 times, then quickly twice, then slowly 7 times, then quickly 3 times, before the loop restarts and everything repeats. As you can see, this is a lot of code and very confusing to look at. Let's see how we can use functions to organize it. The first step to organizing code with functions is to know how to code them. For now, we will discuss void functions with no arguments or parameters because they are the simplest. Non-void functions with arguments and parameters, as well as the meaning of words like void, argument, and parameter, will be discussed later in the video. To code a function, type the word void, a space, the function's name, another space, a pair of closed parentheses, a bracket, and then press enter. This will create another bracket. Now you have your function. A function simplifies and organizes code by moving it out of the loop, but since the only code that runs is in the loop, we have to do something to connect the function to the loop. We do that by placing a call to the function in the loop. This is simply the function name, two closed parentheses, and a semicolon. When the processor reads this call, it will read and execute all the code in the function before continuing on with the loop. Before moving on, let me just say that, like with variables, functions should be named in camel case. I was typing fast and recording when I misnamed my function, but you don't have that excuse. Don't forget to use camel case. As you can see here, the code is much easier to read. The code in the loop has been cleaned up, and the descriptive names of the functions tell anyone who looks at the code exactly what will happen. However, there are still large and confusing blocks of code. To deal with this, we'll use low-level functions. Low-level functions are functions usually coded at the bottom of a sketch that handle basic tasks. In this example, the low-level functions we will use will handle blinking fast and blinking slow, something our code does a lot. Because all of the code inside our pre-existing functions is read by the processor, we can place calls to the low-level functions inside those functions, simplifying our code further still. Look how neat and tidy our code is now. Now that you know how to use functions to organize your code, it's time for you to learn to use functions to give you greater control over your code. This is the part where parameters and arguments come in. Parameters are the data requirements for the function. Many pre-written functions from Arduino have parameters as well. For example, the delay function needs data on how long to delay for. When you code your own functions, you can choose how many parameters you need and how to use them. To create a parameter, type a variable in the closed parentheses of the function. If you want more than one parameter, type a comma after the previous parameter, and then create the next one. When you have as many parameters as you need, use the variables in your function. Whatever data gets sent to your function to satisfy the parameters will be stored in these variables and used whenever you use the variables in your function. The data that you end up sending to the function is called the argument, or arguments if you have multiple parameters. To do this, type the data in the closed parentheses in the call of your function using commas for multiple arguments like you do for parameters. Parameters and arguments may be confusing and seem like the same thing, so let me use this function to illustrate the difference. The parameter is int slow delay because the function needs to know how much to delay in order to complete its task. Whatever data you end up sending to satisfy this requirement is the argument. This updated code shows how using arguments and parameters with functions can give you much greater control over the code. In each of the main functions, I've locally declared the variable blink delay. Because each blink delay is locally declared, they don't interfere with each other, and I can give each one its own value for its own function. This is then used to satisfy the parameters for blink fast and blink slow. Taken together, this means that I can make the 7 slow blinks faster or slower than the first 5 slow blinks by changing just one number. And I can do the same thing with the second 3 fast blinks as well. If I didn't have arguments and parameters to do this, I would have needed to make 2 more fast and slow blink functions with different speeds and change the number of both delays every time I wanted to mess around with the blink speed. As you can see, this has saved me a lot of time. Aside from organizing code and making code easier to control, there is one last thing you can use functions for: finding data. To do this, you will need to know some math, which means I can't teach you about it this video. However, I hope to make my next video the math video, so you shouldn't have to wait too long. Until then, use functions to organize and control your code. Messing around with a blinking light may be a bit boring, but if my plans work out, you should be able to start coding much more complicated and fun applications 2 videos from now. Okay, time for this week's charity shoutout. With all of the crazy events happening recently, I thought I'd take a moment to ask you to donate to the ACLU. Although recently, they've been focused on fighting unconstitutional practices and civil liberty violations by certain police departments, they also fight for the civil liberties of Americans in a wide variety of areas. If you would like to make a donation, simply go to their site and donate.